Hi, Sandra here from Create in Spain, and today's video is about punched designs done on my silver bullet. Oops, I've got the fan going so things are rolling around. Now, I happen to like punched designs. I think they can be really pretty and they can add a lot of extra detail to your cards. But they're not necessarily straightforward if you don't know what you're doing. But first of all, I want to show you the punch tool. It's very easy to put together. I won't go into those details. It's basically a piece that holds the needle and it's put into a holder and then the whole lot's tightened up. But this collar here retracts to expose the needle. And I don't know if you can actually see that against my hand, but there is a very sharp needle there. Now you can get needles in different sizes for this, and indeed this tool comes with two different collars. You can buy the tool with one collar and then you can buy an additional collar for different sizes if you so wish. And as I said, I've taken to using this and I think it's great fun, but there are a few little do's and don'ts when it comes to designing and when it comes to using it, that if you don't have any experience of them, you might wonder what you're doing. So I'm going to put this one back in its container. I like to keep the needles that I've got in one of these containers to keep them nice and safe. Now, these are different needles for the tool, and these two here are ones which come from Time Graphics, and it's quite noticeable that the points of these are kind of like a pyramid roof. The tip of them is not round, okay, they're sort of four-sided going to a point. And these are normal needles from a machine, a sewing machine, okay, so you can actually use normal needles. You may or may not need to cut them down to length because they need to be a specific length for the tool. So that's that, and I'm just going to put this away so that it's all safe and I don't drop anything anywhere. So punch designs, what are punch designs? Well, this here is a punch design, not the flowers, but the curly whirly bits is a punched design. And this particular one, if you look very closely, you'll see that the holes are in fact squares, and that's because of using a square needle. And if I show you this one, which is very similar, this one has round holes, and that was, guess what, it was made with a round needle. So that's one particular difference. Now there's another difference, and that is how you actually use the tool in the machine in the first place. Now in the software, in Shortcuts a lot, there is a effect called Pierce. And if you use Pierce and apply it to your design, what it will do is it will make the needle or the blade or whatever it is you're using just go doink, doink, doink like that, up and down, rather than doing what a blade normally does, which is scrolling around. So it will literally just pierce holes in things. Now in order to do this, you need to have a piece of foam underneath your paper or your card to pad out your mat so that you don't damage your needles and you don't damage your mat either, and it's got somewhere soft to bed into. So a piece of craft foam is ideal, and it doesn't have to be expensive stuff. It can just be the normal cheap thin craft foam. You don't want a really thick one because it would be quite difficult to stick onto your mat. But if you are just going to use the Pierce tool, you will find that you get very, very, very fine holes. And let me see if I can show you here. you can see larger holes, and you might, if you're lucky, if you've got very good eyesight, see some very tiny ones, and those are the ones which are made by piercing. These are made in a different way. So how do you make the larger holes? It's not just about the needle size. With Short-Cut Slot, if you have the Pro version, you have the ability to draw rhinestone patterns. And basically that is what you do to get the bigger holes, the ones that you can actually see forming the patterns on all of these card fronts. In this particular case, what I did was I set my round rhinestone template to 1 millimeter, so that when the needle goes into the card, it goes down, goes around, and then comes out again. It does a little wobble. Not enough to create a very, very large hole, but just enough to create one that you can see. So that is the method of making the actual holes. Now, one thing which I did notice, for this scrolly sort of pattern, I drew this on my iPad because I find trying to do this sort of thing in Short-Cut Slot on a screen is really, really hard. So I did it freehand on my iPad, and I exported it at first as an SVG. And then I took it into my Short-Cut Slot software and I applied the effect to it. And I was really quite puzzled when I looked at what I'd done, and it looked more like a tree than curls and swirls. It hadn't done what I thought it was going to do. And then I thought about it and I thought, that's because an SVG is basically already a series of dots forming lines. So I was asking the software to form more dots along dots, but it doesn't work. So I took the very same image and exported it from my iPad as a PNG. I then went into the software and I selected Import SVG. Notice I exported a PNG but told it to import an SVG, and it will actually import a PNG using that function and apply a cut line to it. It's kind of weird, but it does. Now, the software I was using is Concepts, and maybe it doesn't do it on all software that exports PNGs, I have no idea. But in Concepts, if I export it as a PNG, it will then import as an SVG. It's already got a cut line attached to it. It doesn't need to be traced. Weird, but true. So then when I applied the effect on it, it worked. It gave me exactly the result that I would expect. It gave me all the curls and things. It didn't look like a tree with malformed branches. So the moral of the tale is, if you're going to apply that effect to something and you're not getting the effect that you think you should get with the settings you've got, try importing a different file format, and you may well find that makes a big difference. So you've sorted out your design file, you've decided you want to punch your design, and you know that you want to apply a rhinestone effect. So how do you physically do it? Well, you have two choices. If you want to cut out a border or another part of the design, like on this one I have flowers, you have a couple of options. You can put the foam underneath, you can set it to do the punch, and then you can carefully remove that, and then you can tell it to do its cut design, or you can do the cut design first and then you can put that under there, match up your origin point, make sure you set it to WYSIWYG because that will confuse your images otherwise, and then you can set it to do the punches afterwards. So you could do it either way. I also find I have the Platinum machine, so I've got a double head machine, but I also find that when it comes to doing different effects like this, it pays to switch off the bit that you don't want to do at first. So if, for example, I know I'm going to be doing a punch design, I'll switch off or hide all the other lines so that I'm not going to do it by accident. Okay, it is very easy to set things going and then you think, oh no, I haven't set it correctly and it started doing something you don't want it to do, and then you're stuck with it. So what I tend to do is switch off the other lines, hide them, and go to my settings, make sure I've got it set to my left hand tool, that I have set the correct settings on that left hand tool, do that, and then do my cut lines as I would do my cut lines normally. So I don't have to remove the tool from my machine because I've got the two heads, but I make sure that I have really and truly separated them, and I'm not going to be cutting my punch lines and punching my cut lines, or vice versa. Okay, so that's how to do it, and it's a really nice effect when it's done well. You saw these when they were just plain white, and to be honest, I think that is one of the nicest ways of using a piercing tool, to just do a very, very simple, plain, one-coloured card. But these I've coloured in different ways. This one, I just took some chalks and basically grated them with a craft knife. So I just swiped them over, and then I sprayed it with some water and I simply swiped it over with a brush. I then applied some of the shimmer so that there is a little shimmer on this card as well. But this is what it actually does. Okay, that particular one was done with a round needle. No, hang on. No, sorry, that one was the one that's done with a square needle. Sorry. Okay. So these two are coloured just by using a blending tool and some inks. Now, these are just test cards because these particular pieces of card were already damaged before I used them. So they do have little lines on where they've had other marks. But on this one you can see what I've done here with the flowers is I've pressed it from the back to the front. So that flower is raised up in a different way to these, so you don't have to stick to doing the flowers the same way. But this one has been done with the round needle, and I don't know if you can see it too clearly on camera, but it certainly shows up. And then this one shows up still more, and that's probably because these little holes look kind of darker because of the darker colour that I have used with the ink blending tool. Okay, and this one is definitely a test one because I didn't use my matting frames to put this on the front, and I've managed to get it skewed. I should have known better, shouldn't I? I should have used the matting frame. Anyway, that's the effect that you can get with the punch tool. There is another way of setting up the software to cope with doing the punching, and that is to do the design as a print and cut so that you have registration marks in place. You don't have to do any actual printing other than the registration marks. But if you have the registration marks in place, if you do the first bit, say the punching, with the registration marks first of all and a pad underneath, you can do that. You can then take it off the mat if you need to. It doesn't matter if it moves on the mat. You then line it up with the registration marks again to do the rest of your cut pattern. And thanks for Dawn from Time Graphics for that idea, because that way of doing it hadn't actually occurred to me.